Today's episode of She Brew in the City is brought to you by Top Dog Tours. Whether you're visiting Toronto, Boston, Philadelphia, or New York City, we've got something for everybody. Visit us at topdogtours.com to book your tour today and follow us on social media for any special offers and discounts. Due to an equipment malfunction about 16 minutes into the interview, the audio gets a little jumbled. We tried our best to fix it, but please bear with us as we figure out how all this equipment works. We hope you enjoy the episode. Hi, I'm Nicole Kelly, and this is She Brew in the City. And today I am talking with Dara Bloomfield, who is a performer and actor who has a very unique Broadway debut story, which I think is very relevant to Judaism and Broadway in general. So how are you doing today, Dara?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. A little tired, but that's, I guess, par for the course when you have
I get it.
a toddler.
I have two. I think my son's the same, almost the same age as your daughter. I get it.
So I always like to start off by asking my guests about their Jewish upbringing, where you're from, how religious were you? What was your denomination, if any? Did you have a bat mitzvah? All of that good stuff.
All right. So I grew up on Long Island, more specifically in Jericho, which is very Jewish. I from like 14, actually from like the age of like 12 and a half to about 14, I was going to like 4 bar bat mitzvahs a weekend.
That's a lot.
It was pretty nuts. It's now geared more towards kids, but when I was a kid, it was geared towards the parents.
Okay.
So it was a lot of black tie at country clubs.
Mm.
It was something, but it were like mini weddings.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So I grew up in a really heavily Jewish neighborhood with all my friends for the most part, were Jewish. But I would describe my family as Jewish. We weren't necessarily religious, but my parents were very traditional.
Mm-hmm.
So we followed a lot of the traditions of Judaism and like, for example, all my sisters and my cousins were all named for people who have passed, which is why like my cousin and I have the same initials.
Oh, okay.
But we didn't go to synagogue and I actually didn't even have a bat mitzvah. I had a big 13th birthday party instead, which is kind of a story within itself. But
did your 13th birthday have a theme at least?
Yes, it did. It was music.
Okay. I like it.
We did not. I bucked the Broadway theme. I thought I was too cool for it. So we went for the generic music.
Okay. I love it. So still had a big 13th birthday party, even though you didn't have a bat mitzvah.
Yeah.
Is that something that you would be interested in doing as an adult? Because I know there's adult b'nai mitzvahs. They're very popular nowadays.
Yeah, actually, it's funny. I was talking about it with my dad a while ago, and I kind of was half joking, but half serious. Like I think for my 36th birthday, I would do it. I mean, our wedding was actually way more religious than we thought we were going to have it. We had a ketubah, we had a rabbi, and our huppah was really, really special. My aunt, my sisters, and I actually crocheted it, and we used it as something that my grandma had made, and as part of it, and it was a massive project that took like a year. And we finished it at 1:00 in the morning the night before the wedding.
Very close call.
Yes, very close call. And my sisters actually were joking that during the ketubah signing, they were like, "Why are we in the production of Fiddler on the Roof?"
Why did your wedding end up being more religious than you thought it would be? Is it something from your husband's family, or is it just something?
I think it was just something that kind of just evolved. Like we just both kind of decided that we were going to do it. We were going to do it. I don't want to say right, but we were going to do it in a more traditional sense. Like we definitely just were like, well, let's just do it. If we're going to do it, let's do this. And it wasn't fully like, it was on a Saturday night before sunset.
Mm-hmm.
Our rabbi was awesome and we love her. And she actually did our son's baby naming. We didn't do a bris. So we kind of make our own traditions.
Okay. I feel like that's a thing that a lot of people these days tend to do. If they don't really identify as very religious or unaffiliated with the synagogue, they kind of pick and choose what they're comfortable with and things like that. So I feel like that's way more common than I even thought kind of before.
Me too. Yeah, because my son was born in like the heavy midst of COVID, and we didn't feel comfortable having a bris, and we reached out to the rabbi who did our wedding. And we said, "Listen, we want to still do a baby naming. Is that a thing?" And she's like, "Absolutely." She's like, "That's what a lot of people are doing."
We actually had our daughter's naming. I think she was 9 months old. She was born in May, and we didn't do it till January the following year. And there was actually like a resurgence of COVID at that time, so
Exactly.
everybody was wearing a mask. It was a whole thing. We
Oh
didn't know
my
if we
God.
were actually.
Yeah, we did our son's baby naming on Zoom.
I mean, that Zoom makes things a lot easier nowadays as far as like people being able to connect with each other. We definitely had some people, because we did it in California, who our friends in New York were on Zoom watching it. So I think it makes it easier for lots of people to participate in celebrations that they might not be able to.
Oh yeah, it was great. Like, my sister and her husband live in Miami, and we had family in Massachusetts, and we had family in Connecticut, and it was great that everybody was kind of able to join and not necessarily have to be in New York.
So I really want to delve into your relationship with the musical Ragtime. But
Hmm.
first, I am curious about how you became interested in performing, because you started professionally performing at such a young age. How did that start?
I always loved it. I was the kid who walked around with like the mini tape recorder and sang karaoke. I loved my mom was really big into showing me movie musicals. And so I was into Grease and Annie and all of those like introductory like movie musicals.
Grease, which is
And
very inappropriate
then,
for children.
oh, 100%. But like, I remember my mom tried showing me Rocky Horror when I was like seven.
Oh my goodness.
And I just was like, nope.
It's a little much, I think, even for some adults. So definitely as a child, I can imagine being confused and overwhelmed.
I was like, I don't like this one. But I grew up in like a very like my aunt worked in theater, my mom worked in entertainment. My dad loves it, like loves movies, so for us it was just kind of normal. And then when I was 5, I saw Cats, and by the time we got to Memory, I was sold.
Was that your first Broadway show?
No, actually, my first Broadway show was Peter Pan. I was like way too young to go see it. I was probably about like two and a half.
Kathy Rigby Peter Pan?
Yep. And I loved the Mary Martin Peter Pan.
Hmm. We watched that with
But
our
according
daughter
to
a
my
lot.
dad, I like stood up on the seat and started screaming at the light, yelling tank over and over. I was like two and a half, and my mom was like, I think we're too young for this. Um, and at that point, Broadway did not have age limits. We, my mom held off again, and we went to go see Cats. And by the time we got to Memory, I was like, that's what I want to do. And my mom and my dad knew I can sing. They signed me up for voice lessons, and I went in for the Broadway revival of Annie as just an open call, and I made it all the way to the end. Right before they had this big like casting session publicity thing at Macy's, I made it right before that cut. And at that point, my mom was like, "Oh, okay, let's see what happens." And I just kept auditioning after that. So Ragtime was about 2 years into me heavily auditioning.
Okay, so you had some experience at this point. It wasn't really your first professional audition.
No, by the time Ragtime rolled around, I would gotten close, but not gotten anything for about 3 or 4 shows.
Okay, okay. Can you walk me through what the audition process for Ragtime was like? Did you audition for the production when like the original call, or was this a replacement call, or how
It
did?
was a replacement call. So Leah outgrew the role. The girl who was understudying her at the time they were going to start alternating. So two little girls would go on for an X amount of shows. And that the understudy was going on vacation. So they needed to hire somebody who was going to ultimately take over, but also be a replacement
Gotcha.
understudy for when the girl who was already cast was going on vacation. So I remember going to the audition in it was the Ford Center. Now it's the Lyric Theater, but there's a rehearsal studio actually on the top floor,
Oh,
and
I didn't know that.
that's yeah, it's a massive space. and they did the audition there. That was the first audition was there. Then they called my manager back and asked me to come back in for a callback, but to wear a dress.
What were you wearing at the initial audition?
I used to wear it like I had this lucky pair of overalls I wore for everything. So it was a pair of overalls and they were like, we need her in a dress. So I remember my mom hunting down like this weirdly perfect purple dress with a pair of boots that just worked beautifully for it. And I remember going to the second audition, which I think was at Chelsea Studios.
Hmm.
Um, and I just remember looking around and like I was the only brown hair, brown eyed girl there, which was weird. But considering the fact like the other little girls we looked similar. And I just remember my mom actually turning around to me and being like, one of these things is not like the other.
That's really funny because it is a very, very Jewish role. So you
I
think
know.
that, well,
Yeah, and
okay, to be specific, an Ashkenazi Jewish role because there's
yes.
not like a way to look Jewish, but this is specifically an Ashkenazi Jewish immigrant child.
Interestingly enough, like I know Leah identifies as Jewish, but the girl who I ended up sharing the role with was not Jewish.
Hmm. What was she if she wasn't Jewish?
I don't remember exactly what I know she identified as just Christian, but her parents were very religious. It was also like the late 90s where like I remember I went in for the Kenny Rogers musical spectacular. That was a thing.
Mm.
And I even missed a callback for for another show because this was like the final push and I was told through my manager the reason why I didn't get it was because I was too Jewish looking.
I mean, you gotta love a time where they could just be blatantly racist a little bit
Yeah.
in
Mhm.
casting and be like,
Yeah.
she looked too Jewish.
To play a
Now,
Christmas angel.
not naming any specific national tours of shows, you don't need to be Jewish at all to
I
play a
know.
Jewish role. So it's the exact opposite. So it's back and forth.
Exactly.
So so you had your second audition in your perfect dress.
Yeah, and I went in, I sang, and I'll never forget Frank Lotti's face when I hit a high note, and it just was like, oh my God, this kid, and I walked out, and I didn't even think anything of it, and because kid logic and kid time, I have no idea how much time passed between that second audition and when my
It could have
mom.
been an hour. It could have been 3 years. You have no idea.
Yeah, exactly. It could have been a week. I have
Yeah.
no idea. That my manager called my mom, told her that I booked it, and my mom was actually waiting for my dad to come home from work to tell me. My mom was in another room taking the phone call, and I just happened to walk in to get something, and I overheard, and I was like, "No way."
That's very cool that she wanted to wait to include your dad, but that in true kid form, you heard something that you weren't supposed to hear. Did you pretend you
Exactly.
didn't hear, or did
No, no, no.
no?
I mean, I walked in as I'm like, my mom is like, there was no way to pretend like I didn't hear it.
That's so interesting that it was only the initial audition and the first callback because I feel like now, not that Little Girl's like the lead character for Ragtime, but I know leads for Broadway shows. Sometimes you go through even like they used to do Frankie Valley Camp. Like you will have one-on-one sessions with the assistant director and the musical director, and it's kind of a crazy,
That was
sometimes
the
month-long
sound of
process.
music.
Oh, okay.
Oh my God. We actually had to sign a waiver because they did so many callbacks for that.
That's a
Oh
lot
my
of Rodgers and
God.
Hammerstein.
And by the time for the end, all the kids, like they had to stand in this little black box theater while they called out, like, one, like you step back, you step forward, you step back to get the look of the kids. And I made it all the way to the end. And the only reason why I didn't get it was because the little girl who did get it, her brother had gotten one of the boys.
So they weren't
And
actual
so,
siblings.
exactly. And she was blonde, I was brunette. And it just came down to like basically semantics at that
I mean,
point.
I tell guests when I give tours all the time that it's such arbitrary, ridiculous reasons that people don't book roles that have nothing to do with their talent or them. There was a director in Los Angeles who has since passed away that did not like the dress I wore the first time he saw me audition and subsequently never called me back, or he's like, she didn't look like her headshot. So in his mind, he had decided that I was not acceptable to even call back. So it's very strange reasons you don't book things.
Oh yeah, I mean, I got so far for that, and it was heartbreaking. Like it was so heartbreaking.
especially as a
But
little kid, because you don't really fully
exactly.
understand that it wasn't
Yeah, I
intended
mean,
there.
and you kind of do because you've been through the process before. Like it's always like that. It's always, a matter of who do you look like, especially when you're playing someone's daughter,
Yeah.
someone's sister. Like you kind of have to like take that into account. So that was the audition before Ragtime for me, and so getting that was amazing. And I think also they're under a time crunch. They just needed to replace somebody to because there was a deadline. Like this girl was going on
So
vacation.
you kind of lucked out with
Um,
the not having the months long process, making it super stressful. Not that, you wouldn't
oh
even
yeah,
notice, as you said.
no, I wouldn't. I mean, so the like I said, I was like got close on like three shows, and one of them was Les Mis, and they kept telling me for months like you're next, you're next, you're next. Um, and I would go in. I would literally just sing one line of Castle on a Cloud, they'd measure me, and then they'd be like, "How's school?"
Yeah, they were just basically making sure that you would be fitting the costumes and look correct.
Exactly. And the coolest was I actually, and I didn't realize how cool this was until I was older. I auditioned in the Imperial, like on the like in the Imperial Theater. Like they sent me to see the show. They sent me to audition in the theater. I was like, oh my God, this is like, I thought it was, I don't know, like at the time I was kind of a little bit like nonchalant about it, but like now it's like, that was really awesome. Like I had a very like funny girl
For
experience.
those of you not familiar with Broadway auditions, you don't typically audition in the theater. So you audition in smaller rehearsal spaces, which is not at all like performing in a theater. And they really don't even, I think, nowadays have people's final callbacks on stages, which I think is weird because you'd want to see how they fill the space. I think they used to do this. This was very common where they'd have even open calls in theaters, but they don't do that anymore.
Yeah, no, this so it was really cool. And I actually ended up getting the phone call from my manager like the same week I booked Ragtime that I got Les Mis,
Oh
and
my
my
gosh.
parents had to make the decision.
So can you walk me through what a typical day was like for you as a child working on Broadway? Did you go to regular school? Did you only go to the theater sometimes because you were alternating the role? How did that work?
So I was at the theater every day for every show, and I went to school, except I missed a lot. I performed on Wednesday afternoons, so I would go to school for like maybe 2 hours, if that. Actually, the year that I did Ragtime, it was interesting. New York State had just implemented like new standardized testing for fourth graders, and so my teachers were really concerned that my test scores wouldn't be great because I was missing so much school. So they put me in a couple of different supports, and they basically were like, listen, homework's stupid, but make sure that you do these worksheets for this testing.
I feel like all the children of the 90s, it was very standardized testing focused. I think that's why a lot of us probably did good on SATs and ACDs and things like that because we had been trained since we were very small children to do very well on standardized tests.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. So like for us, it was like I was like, you know what? Did the standardized testing. I aced it. Like it was fine. I read a lot of books. Read a lot. Um, it was we made it work, and that's exactly just it was completely abnormal for a year and a half. But I wouldn't have traded experience for anything else.
So, for those of you that aren't familiar with the story of Ragtime, there are multiple groups of people they follow. One is this waspy upper class family. Then we have the African American group, and we have a Jewish Ashkenazi immigrant father and his little girl. And that is the part that Dara played. Do you think that doing Ragtime kind of connected you a little bit more with your Judaism, made you more aware of your heritage? Is this something that you looked into, did any research about?
So it was my family's story, at least part of it. My mom's side of the family, they came into the United States around the same exact time as Ragtime. So my mom and my dad and took me to Ellis Island, which is where a big part of the story takes place, at least the little girl story. So I went to Ellis Island. My mom bought me books upon books about immigrants, and I did a little bit more research into my own family and about their living situation, and I did it was hands on and it was fun, but I did do a lot of research for a 10-year-old on like what it was like to be in that. And then through that, like just learning about my family story, it definitely impacted me a lot.
Did you, as a child, have your own dressing room, or did you share with some of the adults?
Oh, no. Kids have to have their own dressing room. So we actually had two, technically. We had one that was the little girl dressing room, and then we had a kids room that was in the between the men and women's ensemble. That was like our place to hang out when we weren't on stage. But I hung out in the green room anyway. Technically, I wasn't supposed to, but I was there all the time.
Was this before the era of child guardians? Because I actually know some people who that's literally their job, is they are guardians for children on Broadway.
No, we had one. But it was definitely a lot less, because a good friend of mine's a child guardian. I tell her all the things that we did, and she was like, "I'd be fired the first day."
It was the 90s.
It was the 90s. I mean,
I find myself saying that a lot lately. Like, it was the 90s.
It was the 90s. No one cared. The way that the ragtime set was, there was this massive catwalk that would get lowered and raised and serve different functions. But I used to love going up there and doing my homework, which is hilarious because my son, this weekend, we went to a function at his preschool, and there's a sky trampoline, and he booked it onto the sky trampoline, and I freaked out. So the fact that I would sit on this catwalk above a Broadway stage and do my homework without even thinking about it, they would literally be like, "Dara, you got to get down." I was like, "Oh, okay."
They're like, "This is a major safety hazard. Let's get you down from there."
No. They were like, "We have to use this. So here, so come down. Well, you can go back up." Like I would go and do my homework up there. I used to bring my books and like read with a mag light, like towards the end of Act 2 before the bow. Is like I was like, we just ran the place. Like,
I've done a lot of shows with kids because I've done Fiddler 1,700 times. So I feel like the kids do kind of run around and do whatever they want. And the cast just kind of embraces them and goes, "Oh, they're so cute."
I distinctly remember that at the time there was talk of they're doing a revival. Do you know the play The Bad Seed at all?
Of course I know the play The Bad Seed because I love all things macabre, and my father especially, really big on TCM and vintage
Gotcha.
movie. So it's, yes, I probably at too early of an age watched The Bad Seed.
Okay, so there was talk of they were doing a Bad Seed revival, and everybody heard about it and immediately was like, this is your role. Like, this.
I don't know if that's a good thing.
I don't know, but like they were like, this is for you. So I had like 3 people buy me the play. I sat in the green room playing cards. We bet for candy, memorizing the movie. I don't even know. Like, we were treated like mini adults.
I think that a lot of children involved with performing at an early age, my husband did a lot of professional theater as a very young kid, they end up acting and being treated like mini adults. And I think that does affect their growth and maturity level a little bit.
Oh, 100%. I didn't.
Very adult world,
yeah.
And literally like having a job in 4th grade.
I didn't catch up to the rest of my friends until college, when it was like a more even playing field. But I was ordering my own food. I was writing checks for my voice lessons, obviously not signing them, but like I was filling them out in the car. You know, I was doing things that like for my friends seemed completely foreign, but for me was completely normal. And we were mini adults. I'll never forget, I went to my mom had friends who were having like a 25th anniversary party, and one of them was an agent. So there was a lot of actors there. And the only way my parents can go to the party, because I was in the show, was if I went. So I was able to go to this party, and I walk over to this table, and Marin Mazie's there. And I didn't work with Marin for very long. I maybe overlapped with her for about 2 weeks. But of course, you know, being me and 10 and thinking that I, you know, rule the place, walked over, just pulled up a chair, started having a conversation, and my mom was like, "I am so sorry." But I was a very obnoxious 10-year-old. But she could not have been any like sweeter or more gracious.
I feel like you're precocious, obnoxious. I was also a very precocious child who had a very big vocabulary and talked like an adult. So I think you can say precocious instead of obnoxious. But I think, you know, you have to really adapt, and it does take a certain type of child to thrive in a performing situation? Because it's hard in adults. So I think it takes a very specific type of child to be able to function in that world. It's really difficult.
It really is. And another story that my family likes to tell is my first musical, my first like full production musical that I ever did when I was little, right before I did Ragtime, was You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown, where my acting teacher added the role of Sally for me.
This was before the revival then.
This was before the revival. So there was no My New Philosophy. There was nothing. So like he basically took the girl who played Patty couldn't sing. So he basically just gave me all Patty singing lines. It was completely off, like not a real thing, like wrote in a scene for me here and there and made me Sally. And then Your Good Man, Charlie Brown opened on Broadway and we went to go see it. And I'm by the stage door and my mom had known Anthony Rapp from when she worked, said something to Anthony Rapp, he came over, and then he started introducing the entire cast. And at that point I had fell in love with Kristen Chenoweth because she was phenomenal. She's Kristen Chenoweth. And she's signing my playbill and I just look at her and I'm like, I originated as Sally Brown. In his small acting class production of Your Good Man, Charlie Brown. And she thought it was really funny.
But that's what I'm saying, precocious.
Exactly. Because and then through a even weirder connection, her acting teacher from college was in Ragtime with me.
Oh, okay.
So it was kind of like she, as soon as someone was my mom's like, I'm sorry, but she does this too. Like she was in Ragtime. And so we had that. And then I ended up at the opening night party for Your Good Man, Charlie Brown. And I was looking for a Sally doll for my dressing room. And I think Roger Bart had a Sally doll and she made him trade me for whatever doll I had.
They had dolls.
They were giving out stuffed animals. They were giving out
stuffed dolls. Gotcha.
And I wanted the Sally one. And I think she was she spotted me. She was like, "You the original Sally Brown."
So she remembered.
Yeah.
That's so cute. Earlier this year, you participated in the Ragtime reunion concert. What was it like revisiting this material now that you're an adult, now that you're a mother, now that you've kind of had a lived experience?
It was so special. I did it, I was 23 weeks pregnant, which was an experience within itself.
Yeah.
And that was after we did a full week in Disney the week before.
Oh, that sounds exhausting without having to do rehearsal for a show.
The show was completely different. To me, it took on a completely different meaning. It took on a completely different, everything about it was different. I understood so much more than I did when I was 10. And not because I was because I was an adult. Actually, I should say that. Because I was an adult. I had 2 kids. So watching Mother's Story, I get it. I completely understand, especially as a mom to a little boy. Watching Tata's story, I understand the sacrifices and everything. That it was just the whole experience was just I can't even put into words how special that was.
What was it like reconnecting with some of the performers you had worked with when you were as a kid as an adult? Did they treat you differently? What was that like?
Yes and no. So I was still a little kid to them, which is kind of funny because I'm, like I said, I was 22 weeks pregnant. I have a 2-year-old. I'm 34. I'm an adult. I'm probably older than they were when they did the show. And it was still reverted back a little bit to they just couldn't get over the fact that I wasn't 10.
Yeah, I feel like that's a very common thing. I think sometimes you're kind of stuck in their head in how they first met you. Even with people in my life, like my great aunt is 86 and I still think of her as in her 50s because that's kind of like when I was a kid, and she was very active. So it's difficult, I think, both ways to kind of readjust your relationship with some people.
Oh, yeah. But it was awesome. And I went from playing little girl and then in the, when we did this in the ensemble, and it was roles I've never done before, songs I've never sang before. And I kind of had to got kind of thrown into it. And everyone was so helpful and trying to, fit me in, trying to figure out where I went, telling me whose place I was in instead of that person. And that was really cool.
I love that they did the reunion concert. I think Ragtime in general is just a very emotional show. My husband tears up every time he hears the opening, and I love music so much. So I think that, especially with everything that's kind of been going on in the world, it was a really appropriate time to do that.
It was the best time for that to happen. I'm not an emotional person typically. I can hold myself, but there's a segment within the show they call it the Lawrence Mass section. To kind of give a little bit of background on it, it's where Tata and this little girl are in Lawrence, Massachusetts. There's a strike, which then leads into the night that Golden spoke at Union Square, which then leads into Tata having to put his daughter on a train because he just can't support her the way that he needs to support her, and she freaks out, and there's a riot that breaks out, and it leads into this beautiful song called Gliding.
At Union Square. I hate you, goddamn America! Don't cry. Don't be afraid. I'm here. We're together. Look what I made for you. See the silhouettes. It's a little book of silhouettes. When you flip the pages.
So that whole section is shorthand term as the Lawrence Mass sequence. The second that the bump, 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 I lost it during the Stitch Pope. I completely bawled. And like everyone's like around me and I'm like crying, laughing because I'm like laughing at myself for getting like, why am I like feeling this way? But like I'm like hysterically crying, and for a lot of different reasons. One, that was like the most work I did in the show as an actor, because I was on stage for the entirety of it. Also, it was scarring. I didn't realize how traumatizing that was until I had to revisit it, because it's a terrifying thing for a child. The choreography for it is the little girl gets passed around to person, and I think subconsciously I never memorized who I was going to, so that way I was scared when I got on the train and had to scream for my father to come get me and cry, and like every show I did that, and it was really emotional. It just was. I lost it.
I think that's a testament to good theater, that sometimes it surprises you how emotional you can get in response to certain things. Like, even if you obviously didn't do the show for a year and a half, I feel like there have been moments where I've seen plays or musicals and I'm just shocked by how emotional I get. And I think that's a testament to the power of good theater, is that you're actually really, I was saying to my husband, we were talking about, I don't remember which bad show we were talking about, but I think good theater, you leave the theater changed. You leave a changed person. And I think most people I talk to love Ragtime because it has changed the way that they viewed something, or they feel changed by the story. They can relate to it in some way.
I have a playlist I play for my son every night, and Gliding's like one of the top songs on there. And I love that song to begin with. And it just took on a completely different meaning after having my son and after being a mom. And I lost it. And like everyone's sitting there like this poor, like I'm like crying, laughing, and I'm like, I'm fine.
I feel like when I was pregnant, that was my excuse for everything. I'd be like, I'm tired, I'm pregnant, I'm crying, I'm pregnant, I need to go for a walk, I'm pregnant.
It was so special, and I'm so happy that I was able to do it and that I was a part of it, and it was an unbelievable experience.
So, how was the transition from child actor to adult actor?
That's a loaded question.
That's a very loaded question. I know. We can talk about that in general, but what advice would you give for performers who are in the process of making that transition?
I'm trying to think how to word it. It's not what you ever going to expect. To not have any expectations. You're starting from brand new. And like, I think the mistake I made was I rested on my laurels too much.
Interesting.
As opposed to trying to, who I was at 10 and who I was at, let's just say 21 when I graduated from college, or 23. I wasn't the same. And that was the mistake I made, was not realizing that difference and not just embracing that.
I think that's hard to do, even sometimes transitioning as an adult, because I am very much a character actress, and I did a lot of like dance track, fiddler, ingenue work. And now that I'm kind of the age where I'm aging into roles I'm right for, I'll be like, I can sing that song. And I'm like, oh, wait, I'm almost 40. I can do that now. So I feel like even as an adult actor, sometimes those transitions can be difficult. And it's very emotional. I took a class with a casting director, and there was a young woman, she was about to graduate high school, who had done, I think, 5 or 6 Broadway shows at this point, and was very familiar with the casting director, and at one point got very emotional talking about even her journey as an 18-year-old and her difficulty with everyone seeing her as like 11 or 12. And she had to leave the room at one point. She got so emotional, and she wasn't even really starting her career as an adult actor yet. But she was, I think, starting to realize that, like you said, she would have to completely start over. Which, when you worked as an actor for over a decade, or more, that sounds exhausting to me.
It is. And it's like, and you know what, also, I was such a little snob. I was like, things should be done this way, and I wasn't flexible. And I went in there with this expectation that it would be just as easy, but it's not. It's completely different. And so like, and I think that's where a lot of, my friends who did this as adults and as kids and then as adults, that's the trap.
I think that's good advice. Speaking of children who are actors, in 2017, you started Growing Up Broadway. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is and what the inspiration was for that?
Sure. So at that point, I was auditioning, but I wasn't really getting anywhere. And I was so tired of not performing anywhere. And I was actually singing Back to Before in the shower. And I'm like, wow, I'm old enough now to play Mother, which is weird. But I was like, you know what? There was a lot of shows in the late 90s with kids in them. And now we're all old enough to play adults. So I thought I had this idea for a cabaret where, like, what if you took the kid actors who were in a show and then they were singing the roles that they were right for now? And so I pitched it. It got accepted at 54 Below. And
for those of you that don't know, 54 Below is a very prestigious cabaret space here in New York City.
Yeah, and they took the idea and they ran with it, and I was able to get in contact with some of my friends who I know had from when I was working, and they were working at the same time. Also some new people, and it just kind of evolved from there, and it took on kind of a little bit of its life of its own.
I know some of the concerts that were done after that initial concert had people who were child actors currently.
Yeah. So then I decided to expand because I was like, what else can I do? And I was like, there's a lot of kids on Broadway right now. So it was then I incorporated, the newer generation into it, and which was really fun. And I had a show where I would pair an adult and a kid together, and they would do a song. And then I had one where kids would sing adult songs, adults would sing kid songs, and it's a really fun community.
What was it like working with child actors now that you're an adult? Did you find that they were kind of like how you used to be when you were younger?
Slightly different. They're less nerdy.
They're less nerdy.
They're so much less nerdy. They're so much cooler than we were.
I feel like there's so much more opportunity to be nerdy now because of the internet, and you can really deep dive.
Well, there are two types of kids. There were the kids who were just as nerdy as us, and I love them. I love all of them because they're all so great. But like, all the adults, we would be talking about how many cast albums we would listen to and what age were we when we like discovered hair or when we discovered this. And they were like, what's hair? And we're like, what? You need an education.
That is very important to theater education. I got a shout out to my sister who's obsessed with hair. Her dog's name is Burger.
I love it.
That most recent revival, I think she saw it maybe 4 or 5 times. I went and saw it with her twice.
I see. It's funny because like my sisters will say, like, I have 2 sisters and both of them will say that they don't like Broadway shows, but yet they'll quote it.
My sister's the same way. She's like, I'm not a theater person, but then there are certain shows that she knows a lot about. And I think, we used to go see basically every show that came through the Pantages in Los Angeles. And she's seen, I think, a lot more Broadway shows in New York than she probably realizes. Sidebar back to talking about being a kid on Broadway. They had those Broadway kid albums in the 90s. Did you ever?
I auditioned for it.
Auditioned for it. Okay, because I know.
I didn't get into it, but I did audition for it.
So it wasn't actually kids. Was it kids who were on Broadway?
Yeah.
On Broadway and then audition for it.
Yeah.
Gotcha. In 2019, you were one of the producers on the Joe Iconis musical Broadway Bounty Hunter. How did you get involved with that project?
Through my shows at 54 Below. I was producing them, and Jen Tepper, who is the programming director at 54 Below, was lead producer on that, and she brought me on as a co-producer. And that was an amazing experience to be a part of, and it's I took lessons from that into my own work, and then I had my son, then the pandemic, and then I had my second son. So I'm still trying to figure out my footing in all this now, but definitely would love to get into producing. And it's that's the other advice I would give too, is like, acting is not the only job.
I think that once you're involved in the industry, as we like to call it, a lot of people end up doing other things in the industries. They realize they hate auditioning, but they like performing. But unfortunately, you have to audition to perform unless you're a big, big, big star. So they start doing other things. They get involved with photography or producing or directing or writing. So, there are, like you said, a lot of different ways that you can still be involved without actually being on stage or in front of the camera.
Exactly.
You keep talking about your sons. How has becoming a mother changed how you feel about being Jewish, and what traditions do you hope to pass on to them?
Actually, doing the ragtime concert and then having my second son, and in between, my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer around probably almost 10 years ago. She passed away about 2 weeks before my son was born. Like I said, we were never religious, but we were always traditional. Mm-hmm. So having my sons, having the honor of naming them after people who have passed, especially my youngest, who's named after my mom, kind of brought that home. And I, my husband and I will joke around and we'll talk about their bar mitzvahs and like what we think their bar mitzvahs might look like.
So that's something you're definitely going to encourage them to do, even though you didn't have a bat mitzvah?
Yeah, I would love for them to both be bar mitzvahed.
I love that you've not necessarily become more religious, but are encouraging them to find their Jewishness as well. You plan on sending them to Hebrew school?
Yeah, we found this amazing rabbi who, her version of Hebrew school is a little bit different, where she calls it like kitchen table Hebrew school.
Okay.
Where like it's not done like a formal classroom, it's done like kind of like more hands-on, and my husband and I really like that idea. And so like that's something we're hoping that they'll get involved with and things like that. And it's just it's an important part. It's an important part of who they are. It's an important part of who we are. It's what our families are. Like it's just important for them to know the tradition, even if they aren't religious or whatever they decide to do. Just carrying those traditions on, to me, is more important.
If either of your sons wanted at an early age to become actors, one, would you let them do that? And two, do you think that your experiences would change how you handled it maybe differently than what your parents did?
If they told me that they wanted to do it around the same time I did, it was probably around the best age. My parents handled it really well. I have to give them a lot of credit. They always let me be a kid first. They always let me they let me drive the boat in a way. They never pushed me to do anything that I didn't want to do.
Anti-stage moms.
Yeah, and my mom was still a little, like you have to push your kid. Like if this is what they want to do, like you kind of have to do it. But my mom was not Mama Rose.
Gotcha.
She wasn't doing it for her own sake. She was doing it for mine.
Perfect. I think I see even at auditions or shows I've done, there's a lot of parents that are it's obviously they're kind of living vicariously through their kids.
Exactly.
So.
And my mom and my dad were never like that. And they always encouraged us to embrace what we loved.
It's in the blood. Sometimes you can't defer them from making that choice. I feel like, our daughter is a character. She loves to dance and she is already trying to belt, even though she has no idea what she's doing and she's 2.5. But I feel like, my concern with her pursuing performing at a young age would be like, it's hard enough for me, for my own self with the rejection, but then having to watch your child getting rejected, I think would be a million times harder. So like, I think I selfishly don't want her to do it as a kid. So I don't have to go through
it's
that.
Not easy. My mom was very pragmatic and so was my dad. So like they kind of had this rule where it was like, you can cry for like one day and that's it.
See, I'm not pragmatic. I feel like if my daughter didn't get a role, I'd probably be crying for a week longer than she would.
My mom was very much like, you didn't get it. Oh, well, let's go get ice cream.
My husband's very much like that. I feel like I'd get very upset about specific shows that I didn't get. And he was always very able to easily move on. And I'm kind of jealous of that.
I had a hard time moving on, but my mom was like very encouraging of me to be like, you know what? It's okay. You still have a home. You still get fed. You'll still get clothes. Like, you're good.
Of all the shows that because it sounds like you got to the last part of the audition process for quite a few shows, what is the one that you wish you had been able to do?
I think Les Mis, selfishly, because I just love that show. The other one was probably Jane Eyre.
Oh, okay.
I got very far for Jane Eyre.
I guess I didn't realize how many children's shows there were in the 90s. There were a lot of shows with children.
A lot.
I want to, these aren't on the questions that I had listed, but I want to, if you're comfortable, to talk a little bit about your mom.
Sure.
My just kind of full disclosure, my history with breast cancer in general. My mom, when I was 23, was diagnosed with breast cancer, but a very rare form called inflammatory breast cancer. So there is no lump. It's basically in the tissue, and usually by the time it's discovered, it's stage 3. So she was given 10% chance of survival, and miraculously is actually still here with us. And pretty much every other woman in my family has had breast cancer. My grandmother had it twice. My great aunt had it. My grandmother's sister died from it.
Yeah.
I feel like it's a very Jewish thing.
Yeah, I hate to use this word. I got lucky. So when my mom was diagnosed initially, she did the genetic testing and she tested positive for BRCA, which meant all got tested. And I'm double negative, so I am at community risk. It's a little bit of a morbid joke that we hit the genetic lottery jackpot with the Ashkenazi Jews.
No, that's a very thing. You said that your mother passed away 2 weeks before your youngest was born, and you named him after her. What would you tell your sons about your mother?
Their birthdays are in March. And so we went to Disney for my mom's birthday and for my son's birthday. And we have pictures. I mean, my mom was my son's best friend. He loved for weeks. My son he has a speech delay, so he's not really talking yet. But he would go to my dad's house and he would like count the people. He would herd us into one room and look for my mom. Like he knew something was very different. We talk about my mom all the time, my husband and I, and she was a nut. She was crazy, but she was crazy in like the best way humanly possible. She was fun. She loved, she encouraged us to do whatever we wanted to do and what we loved. And she was just the coolest mom. I was really lucky.
Oh, I love that you say that you're lucky. I feel like we should all feel lucky that we get the parents that we get. Unfortunately, not everybody does, but I love when people have good relationships with their parents. I think it only strengthens your relationship with your own children because you had such a good model.
My mom was the type of person who, my dad would get so frustrated because between the three of us, my poor mom was on the phone like probably like 20 out of 24 hours a day because we were constantly calling each other. even like all time.
I feel like my sister and I both talk to my mom at least once a day, if not more. When she used to work at her old company, I feel like we just call her at work and bug her because she was able to talk. So we just kind of shoot the shit, even though she was at work.
We would joke around that like my dad would just be like, "Oh my God, get off the phone." Like my mom would always, I would call my mom and I'd be like, "Mom," and she'd be like, "You just told me that." Like she would joke that I would tell her like she knew when I went to the bathroom. I mean, because I would just call her for everything.
It's great that you had such a good relationship with her. Now that you've had your second child and hopefully are having a little more time, is there a project you'd be interested in producing? Like a show? If you were able to produce your dream Broadway show or project, what would that be?
Yes. The Breakfast Club.
Oh, The Breakfast Club.
A play version of The Breakfast Club.
What about The Breakfast Club speaks to you?
So, like I said, I grew up in a very artsy family. My mom and my dad both love movies and film and TV. I watched everything. And when I was about 12, my mom showed me The Breakfast Club. And I was like, wait, this would be an amazing play. So for like the past 20 something years, in between like doing stuff like working on how it would work and like kind of like adapted it, and it's a lot trickier than just there's a lot that goes into it legally. So I'm still trying to figure out how to get that, but I would love to do that.
You know, I have a friend who went to NYU for grad school in composing, and I guess a question they would always ask when you're writing a musical is, does it sing? Does it need to sing? And I think, to be honest, there's a lot of musicals that I've seen or heard about. I'm like, this didn't need to sing.
Oh, no. Like you know what? If it like I love John Hughes movies. Pretty in Pink, that could sing. That could be an amazing. That could work as a musical. 16 Candles, 100%. Could work as a musical. Breakfast Club? Nope.
Yeah, no. I feel that. I feel like I love good adaptions of movie musicals. I'm a big fan of the musical Legally Blonde.
It's a good one.
I think they did. That is an example of well done adaptation movie musical. But I feel like sometimes they kind of miss the point on the movie musical.
Hairspray to me. Hairspray was amazing. My sister and I were obsessed with it. My sister, for her 13th birthday, almost did a Hairspray theme 13th birthday party because she loved it so much. And I don't know if I love the musical or the original movie more.
They're very different.
Yes.
I love the campiness of the original movie and I how over the top ridiculous it is. But I also feel like Hairspray the musical was really when I was starting to get into musical theater. So it was one of like 3 rotating CDs I had in my car back when we used to have CDs in cars. Very long time ago. And I also feel like I really love the choreography of Hairspray.
Oh my God. Yeah. It was awesome. I mean, the whole show was great, but my sister we would joke that she has this weird ability to like memorize things, and my sister like memorized the entirety of Hairspray and would do like a one-man version of it. And
it sounds like the rest of your family is a little bit theatrical too.
Yeah, but like they'll never admit to it. That's what's so funny about it. Like they'll never admit it. But my youngest sister, who's like the most like I hate musicals, and yet was like, you should show Cade's my oldest. Like you should put on A Year with Frog and Toad for Cade because it's the best show.
That's a deep dive for somebody who says they don't like musical theater. So like, that's really funny. Is there anything else that you want to talk about in regards to Ragtime? Like any cool stories you have about working with anybody or any like interesting performances, like where something went wrong or something that was really special?
I'm trying to think. Like, no, I mean, we just like, it was such a great experience. Like, and I didn't realize how wonderful it was until I was a lot older. But I think the funniest was and this wasn't even in the original run. This was actually at the, for the reunion concert. So like Audra McDonald just swooped in like 2 days before and like nailed it. Like it was a week-long rehearsal and she just showed up like on Friday and Saturday Saturday and Sunday, I'm sorry. And then like the show was Monday. So she didn't like come in until like 2 days before and just, nailed it. But I asked my husband if he can bring my son up so he can meet people. But because of the way that everything was working out, we really didn't get enough time. And so I'm standing in the hallway with my husband and my son, and Audra McDonald comes running by to go because we're switching rooms. And she goes, "Oh my God, is this your baby?" And I was like, "Yeah." She goes, "Hi, Kate, I'm Auntie Audra." And I'm like, "Oh my God." Oh. And I was like, "Kate."
He's like, you have no idea what a momentous experience this is.
Exactly.
I love that she's such a good person. I stage doored her in London. We saw the last performance of Lady Day there, and I was like, this is one of the only times I've stage doored, but she seems like a lovely human being on top of being so talented.
She is. She's an amazing human being. Brian Stokes Mitchell is an amazing person. Peter Friedman, my husband, actually worked on Succession, and when my husband was telling me he was in the cast the first season, and he said Peter Friedman. I was like, wait, he was the original Tata on Ragtime. And so they got to talking, and my husband mentioned my wife did Ragtime. He's like, wait, who was your wife? And so for 4 seasons, it was, he was constantly, like, how's Dara doing? Things like that. That show just had an amazing amount of human beings in it who were just unbelievable.
Maybe that's why it's so special, because there were such amazing people involved, which I can testify is not always the case when you do a show.
No, I mean, Michael Rupert was one of my tatas, and I still talk to him.
Oh, that's so sweet.
And he gave me a Tiffany necklace for the closing, and I wore my necklace to the for the reunion concert, and it just was a really special show with a lot of special people, and it was just like the world's nicest people too.
So as an adult performer, do you have a dream role? If you were able to play any role as an adult now, what would
God, no, that's I love that question. I hate that question because there's so many.
You can give a few. You don't have to.
I love Cinderella and Into the Woods. I would love to do Eponine or Fantine, and Les Mis. For sentimental reasons, Belle and Beauty and the Beast. It's hard. It's such a hard question. It's like whenever anyone asks me what my favorite show is, I can't give them an answer because I have too many.
We usually say we have a rotating top 5 favorite shows, depending on what's going on in the world and how we're feeling at the moment.
I always give the answer of who's the composer and what's, what era.
Yes, it's really hard to narrow it down. So we're going to jump into what I call the Actor Studio questions. It is a ripoff of James Lipton and the Actor Studio. So these are just going to be short form answers. You don't need to kind of wax poetic. What is your favorite Yiddish word?
Gunnuf.
Can you tell our listeners what that means?
The way my dad explains it, it's like a little troll creature.
What is your favorite Jewish holiday?
Let's go with Hanukkah.
If you were to have a bat mitzvah today, what would the theme be?
Obscure musicals.
I feel like that would be my husband's theme as well. What profession other than your own would you want to attempt?
I used to joke that I didn't know if I wanted to be Clarice Starling from Silence of the Lambs or Jodie Foster.
If heaven is real and God is there to welcome you, what would you like to hear them say?
Your mom is ready to go to the mall.
Oh, I love that. So thank you so much for joining me, Dara. It was amazing hearing about your experiences with Ragtime and what you've obviously been doing since then. So if you're interested in following Dara on Instagram, it is Dara Paige Bloomfield. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
If you like what you hear and want to hear more of it, you can subscribe and also follow me on Instagram at SheBrewInTheCity to see what my life is like day to day. I'm also on Patreon if you'd like to have access to some special episodes and offers.